Okay, part two of my healing journey. It's actually really difficult for me to sit down and do videos like this, so I can talk about other people and other things a lot easier. So that's why it's taken so long to do another one. And where I left off um, was talking about early childhood and having an energy attach itself to me, and possibly there was a lineage energy that came through that was actually because my father has very similar things that happened to him in childhood that I did too, and sleeping, bedwetting, um, also hating the siblings, running away, really young too. So there was just kind of wanting to be the only one, not necessarily hating the siblings, but just not understanding why there were more kids here when your parents had more children. So, I mean, and part of why I really want to talk about this is because there is this engineering of our society that says these things don't exist. That okay, there's aliens. That's the whole disclosure thing going on, but there isn't these energies that can haunt your children and haunt your lineage, and that there's agreements that have been made through generations with these interdimensional energies, whatever they are. Um, and it does exist. That's what I'm saying. And my whole sharing of this information, which in general, you don't really want to give too much energy to it, but because I am very clear with my energy field now, it is not difficult to talk about. And then I can make sure that I'm not calling in certain energies. I do practices, I do things to keep my energy field clear. And that is important when even discussing this kind of stuff. So I'm also having a hot flash, so that happens. Midlife stuff. So, and actually, let's address this. Part of having these flashes for women in midlife is I have to stop. When they happen, I have to stop what I'm doing and become super present. So there's a lot of, talk about, oh, just do this, do that, and you won't have them. But also, maybe there's a purpose for it all happening. And of course, I'm not, like some women who are burning up in the night and soaking their bed sheets. I'm not having that. I have like flushes of heat. So that is something that I really feel like there's a value to just going through it and to feeling it, and to it brings me into presence. I go, oh, having hot flash. Okay, what's going on? How am I? Where am I? What am I doing? So it brings me into a present moment to have these flushes of energy come through me. And that's part of the midlife crisis or process, because it is a crisis, it's opportunity. It is a way to, a time where you can look at what you've been doing, how you're doing in your job and your relationship and setting yourself up for the next cycle of life. I'm also burping right now, sorry. Having all kinds of problems, but I'm just gonna take this video how it is. So so I really wanted to share my experience so that people can understand who have children, who I can't tell you how many people tell me their experiences, and oh yeah, I was totally lifted off my bed by an energy. in the night, you know, and it's like staying in places where there's certain energy lines. We live in a grid of energy, and there is certain energies are drawing in like um, negative spirits and energies through the intersection of energy lines, mixing with water, mixing with whatever. It's often like haunted houses. They're old houses. They're on these energies. It's never been cleared. Um, there's ways to work with the land so you can raise the energy of these lines and change that. But we live in this, and this is the metaphysics of this reality, we live in a resonant reality. We come into resonance with whatever we're around. So when I had this experience as a child, I was living in a lot of old houses with, I also have in like my astrology, I have a very shamanic chart. I've been told, you know, like in Chinese astrology, that I would have been, in the old days, I would have been taken, you know, from the parents and raised a certain way, because what happens is that you're more vulnerable to these energies in the first place just by having a certain energy yourself. So that gets into this law of resonance. And I had a parent telling me about her child who has a lot of this energy, shamanic energy, and how he's, you know, waking up in the night, screaming in his sleep. You know, these are real things that we can actually change if we address them. So, and I have addressed them through working with the biogeometry ruler, in which I can change the energy of um, the disturbances in the child's system, because they get disturbed by these energies, and then they are disturbed, and then they're resonating with certain uh, other energies. So it just becomes this like cycle where it just keeps going and going. And some just outgrow it, you know. Some may take on physical problems. You know, this particular child was having some enlarged tonsils, and, you know, that can be related to, you know, having this disturbance. Disturbance doesn't necessarily mean disease, but it can lead to that if you are, um, you know, if you don't like address it and clear it. So we are more than physical beings, and we are living in a very dynamic metaphysical reality. So once we, you know, really understand that, all of our science and psychology, you know, even the study of this phenomenon is called parapsychology. Like, okay, maybe it's psychology, or it just has this other component to it where it's not really valued, and there's this constant like, is there ether? I don't know, you know, and there is. And, you know, even looking at parapsychology, the history of it, you know, it's like, does this exist? Let's do another seance, you know, let's call in more demons, you know. So it is a thing, and it is also at the highest levels of our world politics. Those who control the resources of this reality, they participate in inverted forms of the metaphysics here to get the things they want. And they have agreements with these interdimensional beings in order to get things. They give things and they get things. So it's a whole exchange, and there's a lot of possession, getting possessed by energies. And so with my childhood, I had a lot of early childhood was just like being terrorized, um, not understanding. Um, well, it was sort of like my brother came along. My mom didn't have enough energy to deal with both of us. So I was kind of already very independent. So I'd spend a lot of time alone and with my invisible friend. And this friend looked like the energy that I ended up chasing away later, in my early 30s, when I was doing a lot of work to address it. Now, it's really interesting because what I learned is that we need to apply boundaries to these energies and be clear where we begin and end. We don't have to engage with these energies, but I started to recognize the pattern. This thing would come back. I would have the sleep paralysis, nightmares, and it was connected to fear. When I was in fear, it was like a calling card for this thing to come around and have, terrorize me again. So I was able to clear that. And then a couple times I would have to be like, I know something's around and I'm not going to deal with you. And, you know, so there was a whole thing. I had to be vigilant for a while to keep it away. But it was about overcoming my fear too. So, like I said, I grew up with a lot of fear and anxiety with my mother, probably in the womb. Just she had a lot of paranoia, and not extreme, but healthy levels, normal levels. I think that people who grow up not trusting in the reality, and they pass that down. So when I started to um, get a little older, I mean, finally, I moved around a lot too. So by the time we got in a house we owned, um, in the suburbs in Concord, that was when I was in 5th grade. And by then I had lived in 8 houses. So I I had a lot of houses I lived in. So there I absorbed a lot of different energies in that time too. And I outgrew, the bedwetting that was happening in 2nd and 3rd grade. That was a pretty extreme, because I just couldn't wake up. I was like, I'd clearly been potty trained, and then I just was having the hardest time waking up. And that's when you start having slumber parties and all that, and staying over with your good friends and all that. And that was also a time when everyone had bowl haircuts, which was weird. Why did we all have bowl haircuts? I have no idea. But this gets into the outer programming. And there was a lot of, there's always a lot in the movies and stuff too, to really keep the culture on edge. So I was talking about, before I was born, there was Rosemary's Baby, which was a total occult film. Then came The Exorcist, another big occult film. And there were some really terrifying ones when I was growing up too, that if I even saw like a, a tiny bit of, it would just terrorize me. Like The Shining, or, yeah, just like really awful. Poltergeist. I lived next to a suburb like that. That Poltergeist was filmed in, and it was, these things are real. These things are, oh, Close Encounters. That was a big one. But one of the first ones was the War of the Worlds. That I saw in the back of a wagon where I was supposed to be asleep. Me and my brother were supposed to be asleep for the movies when they were at the drive-in, my parents. So I saw that. I saw a lot of that movie, and that terrified me again. And so I had a lot of fear around these unknowns and these paranormal energies. So as I grew up, I felt like I always had kind of a angry, mean nature to myself, and I didn't fully understand how I was being influenced until like I started to really do some clearing in my 40s. So I didn't really understand my behavior, and I was very much in it. I didn't have a way of perceiving myself from outside of myself. So that the work with plant medicines and the intention and the sweat lodges and stuff really helped me to clear and clear and clear all kinds of things. And I did a lot of recapitulation, just like going over every. There was like a year where I spent like I was going through every relationship, every person I knew, and just going through. And I would do it at night before I went to sleep. Um, and that really just started to clear a lot of stuff, because what starts to happen as we age is we've accumulated so much of these different things that disturb us or take us away from our true nature. And I really felt like a character of myself. I kind of knew who I was, but I felt very much like I was somewhat myself, but I wasn't totally myself. And I am totally myself now. So that comparison, it's like I had no idea who I was, really. And I was just, I'm a Libra sun, so the whole thing with Libras is to merge. You really want to merge, and what are they like? What's their thing like? And then you um, almost like absorb and take on the characteristics. I would do that often with friends. I would take on their mannerisms. I couldn't help myself. It was like this form of um, imitation, which was, flattery, but of course I'd always end up mad because I didn't have my own power in the relationship. I would be so absorbed in their stuff and then realize, wait, I don't like what they're doing. And then just have a problem with it. And that's kind of a classic Libra thing, is like you merge and then you're mad about it later. So learning about my astrology, really played a huge role in doing all the work and clearing stuff from my field. But I became, like, as a teenager, I just became more and more angry and intolerant, and I became a thief. I was starting to steal. I started taking little things here and there, and I had a friend who we would take things from another friend, and because she just had a bunch of stuff and like didn't really keep track of it, so we would just like help ourselves to things. And then I would steal from the store. I taught all the neighbors how to steal that I was hanging out with from this store. They all got caught before I got caught. I had this, a pretty good system, but I just didn't feel any boundaries. If I wanted something, and it was an opportunity, I could take it. So, and stealing is really a bad, I don't know. It's like murder. It's like there's a really high cost to it. And usually I would end up losing things or something would happen in exchange for the things I was stealing. I also worked. I had a job. I was cleaning my neighbor's house. I was babysitting really young, like 12, 13, 14. So it looked like I was making money. So why did I have 100 nail polishes? Well, because I had a job. I was working. And of course, my neighbors, I was cleaning their house and helping myself to whatever I wanted over there in terms of food or, and I just didn't have any sense of like what's yours and what's mine. And it's confusing. So it's confusing. And the whole thing with Libra is to understand boundaries in the moment. I tell people this all the time who are Libras or have a lot of Libra. You'll be loyal, but you won't understand where you, in the moment, when you're being asked something, and maybe you don't want to do it, but you're confused because you want to please. Also, you want to be, because you don't like when people don't like you. So it's this whole thing that we're like constantly balancing out, and it can get really confusing. So I have to say I was very confused, and I didn't understand my emotions at all. Like if I would start crying, I would just be like, I couldn't even like talk or explain. And I had a real problem with my voice, like speaking my truth or saying what I feel. There was no connection. So, I mean, that's pretty typical. We can say, oh, that's just normal teenage stuff, or but there was this extra influence around me. So that is the thing. And I think a lot of people have energies, ancestors, all kinds of energies around you that are influencing your behavior. And I didn't realize until way down the line that when I started doing this work, that I was not clear with a lot of my energy. I was not clear with boundaries. I was not clear. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. That's another thing. We have in menopause. We lose our train of thought. I just got like a message come in. I didn't realize I didn't turn my messages off, and it distracted me. Anyways, where was I? Well, you're experiencing it all right now. Yeah, I had a lot of confusion. And when I started to do clearing, then I started to see that I had real blocks in my throat, that I could not express myself. And I started to, with the encouragement, and I would do, I would perform, when I danced hula in Hawaii, I would perform. I didn't like to go do solos. I wanted to be with the group. I wanted to have the comfort of the group when chanting, or I wasn't like, let me just do this chant on my own. I mean, I would do them on my own when I was getting into the ocean to surf. I would chant, or if I was out by myself in nature, I would chant to harvest different plants for lei. I could do that, but not in front of people in a performing kind of way. So the fact that I can talk right now on the camera, or have a dialogue and an interview, or that is major, and that is something that never could be. In fact, I even went to a UC school, so I didn't have to go to a state school because they required speech, and I didn't want to take speech class because I was so like terrified of speech. The idea of talking in front of people. So that was all kind of tied up with these emotional like confusion. So, so that's where I was talking about as I started to clear more and more, I could see now, and because what happens when you start to clear all the things that have happened in your life and it's like a path kind of starts to open up. And the path is like being able to shift perception. So it's like now I'm not so in whatever's happening. I can look at myself from above and be like, okay, what are you doing? Even if it's not in the moment and it's like later, I could still self-reflect, and see, oh, you thought this was going to happen, and then it didn't happen, and then this is why you are, feeling this way now. It's like, so it created that ability. But when you just are building on so many traumas and you are influenced by these other interdimensional energies or ancestral energies, and this is what my point was, I had a lot of wounded feminine energy around me, and this could be from my mother's line. I'm not sure, but it doesn't really matter where exactly it's from. It was there, and it was influencing me, especially around my relationships with men. So there was a lot of that, and that can relate to having a Leo moon. The moon can be your past life essence energy, and that Leo can be magnetic and ferocious, like a sword wielding. Hi, Kitty's here. Want to say hi? Oh, 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 oh. Kitty. This is Osiris. Anyways, yeah, so I had this, it was like a, and I only saw it later when I had finished with the ceremonies. I had done 12, 13 ceremonies with ayahuasca, and she told me I had kind of this culmination of an incredible ecstatic moments with this beautiful medicine. And she was like, you're good, you can do this on your own now. You don't need to ingest me. You can just sort through. You've got the tools, you've got the clearing of the path. So I respected what she said, because what I was experiencing was people who had done many ceremonies, who were in these circles, and they were very sensitive to just regular 3D energy now, because they had cleared almost too much. And also, it takes a little life force when you use plant medicines. It is a whole thing. They talk about it in like Taoist tradition. When you use a medicine that is giving you visuals, psychedelic visuals, it's taking energy from your liver. So I recognized, I listened, I moved on, and I was able to, before I started working in the sweat lodge diligently, because I had some exposure to sweat lodge, but I didn't, not until like 2020 did I end up doing more, like 2 years of twice a month, really intense sweat lodges, and they were amazing. And I didn't use plant medicines for those, and it was very clearing. Another level, layers came off. But in between that, this is like 2018, 2019, I was like 47. I started to see, I was dating somebody, and I had just like had enough. I was working for him too, so it was just like, it was a lot. So I just, at this moment, I just realized this is not for me, and he was doing some stuff. And anyway, so I ended up leaving. He was we were all packing up, because we were doing the crystal shows, the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show, and I was packing up, and it was a long day, and I was just like, you know what, I'm tired of this guy treating me like this. I'm out of here. And I had a friend over there, so I just like packed up and left, didn't say goodbye. And I could feel in those moments that there was this gang of women going, yeah, do it, leave him, don't, da, 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 da. And that was the first time I really felt that energy. I had a full visual of what that was, and it was, I never got to fully resolve that with that person, because of the dramatic way that I did it. And it didn't have to be like that. It didn't have to have all that drama. So, not that I would have, worked it out with him, because there were a lot of things that were not working with that person. But I didn't have to be such a sword wielding, like, Sekhmet. So, but it was the first time I saw it, and then I was like, oh, okay, this is the energy that I'm working with. And it took a long time to really separate from that reactive, wounded feminine energy. And, there's a lot in our culture today too it supports that, and there is a lot of ways that we've been taught to, as women, have been taught to just, we need to control our relationships, we need to, make a plan and get all these things, and if he's not doing this by this time and that time, and it's like we've really taken over the male-female dynamic in these relationships, and we're taught to, this was the whole feminist movement, take charge, do that. And I had been a preschool teacher in the 90s. I was a preschool teacher for like 10 years. And at the height of my career, where I was just about to leave because I just could not make enough money, even at the top school. And I was really good at what I did. I was really intuitive. I loved working with kids. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about behavior and dynamics between people and all kinds of stuff. And I also learned about these women who were judges and lawyers and doing all this and doing all that and having a family, and their kids were suffering. Their kids were suffering. And it was sad to see, because there was like a couple of part-time kids we'd have at the schools I worked at whose mothers were primarily taking care of them. And they didn't do anything else. And that was kind of frowned upon, to just be a mother. Oh, you're just raising your kids. Like, oh, that's so sad. You're supposed to have a career and do all this thing, do all that. And there's a lot that's lost in that, because also the years before 4 or 5 years old, if you're not with your kids 100%, or don't have a good situation. Of course, some women have to work. They're not, kids do better being raised by others. But it's just, there's a lot of development there and bonding that is really important. That really, some of these kids just they could just pull so much energy from you because they weren't getting the right energy, which is from their parents. They weren't getting that real energy. So, because some of these parents, they had caregivers around all the time, and they would interact with them in a really superficial way, or they'd buy them things or do, but there's always these other people around that were actually doing the holding and the loving and the caring and the, so, and spending just that quality time. So, there's a whole thing with the feminist movement that is really damaging. And I always like to point out, Gloria Steinem is a CIA agent. I don't know if she's still active, but during that time, she was openly a CIA agent. So part of shaping culture, as these social engineers would like to have us be a certain way, and to call the society, you get women to emasculate men, through these dominant, you get equal rights and all that, which is like, yeah, of course you want equal rights, but the ways they were done, then you got to act like a man and that's not the way. I'm sorry. Maybe it is for some, but it's, there were a lot of ways we were being culled to behave certain ways that actually are really damaging, and don't allow men to be men and women to be women. And I know this is like a controversial thing to say in these times, but you know, that is, this is all just my opinion and my experience. And I see it all the time with women. They're constantly like, "Ah, there's no good men out there." It's like, well, you're casting spells right now, because in this reality, and I've lived in a lot of small towns where they say this, and it's there's men everywhere and women are everywhere, and if you think there's no men, then there's no men for you. So we have to really pay attention to the spells, which is spelling, which is speaking into the ether, which is what is all around us, and recognize that we are creating in every moment with our minds. So we can um, we can call in partnership at any time, really. But it's about being confident, and it's about also wanting to do the work and not be dominating, allowing for men to, allowing for the time to think, for things to evolve, allowing, that's my cat scratching the wood, allowing for, um, he's hungry, just allowing for everyone to have their own timing and their own, evolution, and that we don't have to do a certain thing by a certain time. We don't have to be married by a certain age. We don't have to, these are all societal things. They're not everybody's individual path. So I think I've said enough so far. But I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that, and reach out if you're curious about the work I do. It's actually can help clear your disturbances in the body, using, of course, now there's a plane, using the alchemical tools of biogeometry, which is a form of alchemy that has been revived from Egypt. I have a lot of knowledge around this because I do have a connection in my ancestry to this particular understanding of energy. So, and that gets into history and all kinds of things. I'll talk more about that later. But thanks for paying attention. Your time is valuable, and thanks for listening to my story.